I'm okay with most of what you guys have. I mean, there are things that some minor things I quibble with. Um, the only part that there are two parts that I have a big objection to. I'll mention this, but first is the automatic approval
Test, test.
at 50% more than the SOS rates. I'm okay if it's an automatic approval for whatever this meter sets, but not the cap. And the other one, you guys had added. Actually, let me show you. All right. Oh, here where you added residential customers.
Yeah.
I think A2 only applies to commercial.
Okay, we were trying to figure out what A2 was.
Yeah, I think the point to A2 is, well, again, almost all these restrictions
down the screens and run that, even if it was super hot outside, to really cool the house down very fast.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, here we go. This was my fault. I was distracting you. You should have said, we have to just go with it. We have to secure it.
Did you have good meetings yesterday?
Yeah, it went really well. I was able to. Somebody asked about the Piedmont thing, and you know, I really can't comment on it because I'm a judge. Oh, okay. Right. And what's his face? Brian Crosby was trashing out-of-state data centers and that we don't benefit from them. And I held my tongue. I didn't ask everybody by show of hands. How many of you are subscribed to Netflix? How many of you use Gmail?
I thought you said you didn't say it.
Oh no, I held my tongue. I didn't say any of that.
Oh, okay. You wanted to say it.
I wanted. I was thinking it real hard.
Okay.
Maybe they'll get it.
No, I think what we can do is start with, I think Willie Phillips would do very well, Chairman Phillips.
I didn't mention that either. I didn't want to go there.
Yeah.
Instead,
It would just complicate your life.
Use the map of how expensive electricity is, and Northeast and California are super red, and in the middle, and Louisiana, and the places that burn things are really cheap.
Okay, welcome to the Public Service Commission's Rulemaking 84. Let me take appearances first. So, start with you. So.
Hey, good morning, Chairman Commissioners. Eric Wallace with the law firm Green Herlocker on behalf of RISA, NRG, and Clean Choice Energy.
Good morning, Commissioners. Ryan Shu on behalf of OPC also entered the appearance of Pauline Risis.
What was his second name?
Pauline Risis, Raisis. Did I get that right? Yeah.
Good morning, Chair Hoover and Commissioners. Ruth E. Herman on behalf of staff. Also Harrison Scherer on behalf of staff. And our expert, the division head, Kevin Mosier, is here. Thank you.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Brian Quinn with Venable on behalf of Southern Maryland Electric Cooperative, and I have Eugene Bradford from SMECO with me today. Thank you.
Anybody else? Seeing none? All right. Mr. Mosier.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'll just run through the changes we have to the proposed regs and with some explanations. Starting with 2053-0707, and I'll address quickly one under B2C. The Supplier Coalition had recommended removing the language, the supplier's price is not regulated by the Commission. Obviously, given the current situation, staff is not opposed to that change.
Okay.
And then below that in 4, specifically, the language in 4 that has been added, this is directly from SB1 PUA 7707G 1 through 5. With the exception of the highlight in yellow, that was a suggestion from OPC. But again, the rest of this language is a specific requirement of SB1. Okay, and then here under F, the top of the page, the statement about we deliver energy. This was a direct quote from SB1. Both the Suppliers Coalition and OPC have recommended different language. We have little quibble with the Supplier Coalition language. We have no issue with the OPC language. But basically, staff was just a little leery of changing it because it was a direct quote from the legislature in the bill. We're reluctant to recommend changes, but we certainly don't oppose the OPC language. Okay, and then scrolling down to 2053-07-15, the language here is largely from again, direct language from SB1, PUA 7-707D 2 and 3. Now, yeah, and I will say there are a few things in here highlighted that we added that were recommendations from OPC. Those are, let's see, under D2, or I'm sorry, D1, starting with V and I, an independent third-party audit, and then a demonstration that the applicant has significant long-term investments. And then they also added D2 here with the top where it says a supplier must, following an application must, respond to request within a certain amount of time. And again, that was language that OPC had recommended that we had also agreed made sense to
That
add.
definitely excludes nuclear. It has to, the MEACs, they want it to be removed.
Could you speak a little bit louder?
Sure, sorry. The next section, 2061-01-07,
Creating an inlet.
this was added, again, due to language in SB1. In SB1 7510C10, that allows a cooperative specifically to market its SOS or related products. So essentially because of that, I think we, SMECO, and SMECO currently has a green product they're offering. We, at the request of SMECO, put this language in because we didn't see a particularly good reason to make, a cooperative have to meet all the same requirements as a supplier for the green offering that they have. And then below here, 2061-04-01. Again, this is language from SB1 7707E2. This language allows staff to track the Recs retired for a green product in the same manner that we track Recs retired to comply with the RPS. And then specifically requiring adding the phrase green power to the sub-account. That allows staff to very easily differentiate between the marketed green product and the RPS obligated Recs. The other few changes in here, you can see under like C, for instance, we added and geothermal. That's just to update the fact that geothermal has now been added to the RPS, actually, I guess a few years ago. And let's see. And then finally, staff is recommending some minor changes in 2061-04-02. These are just to update and correct references from, I think this has probably been out of date for a few years. But again, just minor corrections to references. And with that, I'm available for any questions.
Okay, any questions for staff? You okay?
Well,
Okay.
So I guess just a process question. So this does not contain some of the other proposed language that we're going to hear from the parties in terms. So it's missing some of the RISA language that they're proposing. So
Yes.
is this just the consensus language that you're?
I'm not sure if I'd say consensus language. It's the sort of the final staff language that we had filed. I will say we might have added a little bit if we had, if the parties met a few days ago, I think on Monday. There's a couple of things that RISA added that we'd be okay with. Other things RISA added that we do oppose. And I think at this point, the only difference between the staff position and OPC's position is, I believe, the language where we had the carve out for the cooperative, and the language towards the very top, the required. Let's see. Oh yeah, the required statement in F here where we deliver electricity. Again, I've seen the OPC language. I have no objection to it. But again, staff was reluctant to change what was directly quoted in the bill.
Okay, so the I thought that there was a difference between you and RISA in terms of what's required for commission approval.
Yes.
Okay, so that's, when are we going to be discussing that?
Well, I guess I can discuss the two objections I have to their language specifically. The first is,
Mr. Roger, if I may, I mean, with Risa's comments, we made those on top of staff.
That's fine. This was mostly just a process question because,
I have a suggestion along those lines.
thank you.
Because if we pulled up the RISA filing, it would show the changes we're proposing on top of what staff has here that was filed earlier this week. And so maybe that would be a way that we could review, see what items are consensus or not.
And maybe
consensus.
then come back to staff with questions. I think that makes sense. Does that make sense to you?
certainly.
Okay.
All right. Well, in that case, then why don't we turn to you? And
Yeah, Mr. Moser, would it be possible to pull up our
I was going to say,
filing on the
do you
screen?
have that?
I believe so. Let me make sure this. Okay, yeah, I think that actually. Let me pull up the.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm not exactly sure how we're gonna go, but
This is just this one chunk of text.
yeah, it's mostly this stuff. And then I guess, I mean, this, I guess this is not wholly different, but it's just kind of different,
Yeah.
And I think we'd have to change it. This is one, and just add that, essentially. Yeah, I don't mind this change, but then I think we're gonna want to do something along the lines of, like in the current application where it says, you have to provide marketing materials before commencing operations, essentially.
So, Chairman, Commissioners, if I suggest we could just take it from the top and walk through the changes. So,
Yeah.
Could you make that a little bit bigger? I mean, I have it here, but
Okay. Yeah.
the first revision we're proposing, so this is within the advertising and solicitation sections applicable to residential customers. And there's language in the rule today that says that the supplier's price is not regulated by the commission. And given the changes with SB1 where, the brown power price will be regulated by the commission. So, and this generally applies to all offers, right? This is not just green power. We're definitely going to talk about green power specific language, but this disclosure is the general disclosure to all retail supply offers. And so we're proposing to remove the language that says that the supplier's price is not regulated by the commission, given the regulatory oversight over supplier pricing in SB1. And I'll just flag that at the bottom of our filing, we made the kind of the same change on the gas side because of the way that the pricing is going to be regulated for both electricity and natural gas. We thought that was an appropriate cleanup here before we get into the green power specific items below. And I believe that staff was okay with that change.
Yeah, absolutely.
OPC is fine with that.
I'm happy to proceed, or if there's any questions.
Yeah, well,
Okay.
either one of you two, any questions? Oh, so,
What document are we looking at right now? Because I have Risa's filing, but everything I have is in red, and it doesn't seem to be matching this. What are we looking at?
This is our filing from yesterday. So we also made, there's been a lot of recent activity in the docket. So this is what we filed yesterday, and we had this, the text is in red, but the highlighting was in this kind of aqua color.
Okay, so maybe I
So
do
this
have.
is this is a PDF of what was filed yesterday.
All right. I'll try to follow along.
Yep. So the next change that we're proposing is in B4, and this is where we get into the green power specific language. The statute requires that certain disclosures about the product be made in plain language, and so staff's proposed language was talking about a conspicuous manner in 12-point font. And I think what we're proposing is let's just track what's in the statute, not to say that it won't be conspicuous and it won't be 12-point font where appropriate, but that may be too prescriptive for depending on the type of media that's involved. And so what the language that we're proposing here tracks the statute and covers the statutory requirements here, but we wanted to align that, and so we're proposing the removing conspicuous manner and 12-point and focusing on the statutory description of plain language.
I don't know.
So instead of being this prescriptive, can we just change the language to read in a manner approved by the commission, so that it's it recognizes that there's going to be a manner that's conspicuous, but rather than, remember, this is in the regs, so you're stuck with the regs. I guess the question is, do you trust us enough to make sure that the disclosure is in a manner that is
I certainly trust you enough. I just don't. I'm not exactly sure what how the approval of what that would look like would be. I mean, if the 12-point font is a little much, I think in a conspicuous manner and in plain language, I think is not particularly prescriptive.
I think one of the issues that with conspicuous manner is that it is, ambiguous. What's conspicuous is depends on the context.
I sort of agree. I mean, it's if it accepted in a manner approved by the commission. I mean, that kind of, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I can see it. I think that also, the in plain language is actually from the statute, but we can take that out or not.
Can I ask a question on that? If we go that route, maybe ask staff and staff counsel, what would that process, how would we, commission, I guess, communicate what is conspicuous, and, how are we going to be applying, how are we going to be compliant with the law, I guess I want to make sure.
Yeah, I think that would be difficult. We could require, as the, with the application, show us a sample of the marketing material you're currently using, and that would work great if, the marketing material was going to be just a mailer that was being sent out. If they started using, radio, television, or something on the web, we'd see that one-time marketing material that they would send in, but when they change the marketing material, countless numbers of time in the future, we don't get those, we don't get every time the supplier changes their marketing, we don't see copies of it. I think as long as the commission is making clear that, we want this, if you're making it clear to the suppliers, the language, whatever used, had better be clear, and there'll be consequences if they're not. I think staff would be fine with, basically whatever language the commission wants to use.
Okay, and you find the RISA language does that, or?
We do like the 12-point font. On the other hand, I understand how, if it's, if it ended up being like a postcard mailer, maybe 12-point font isn't, if everything else is in 10-point, maybe that's okay.
All right, so just to jump in here. So what you're concerned about is, hypothetically, and not casting aspersions on your clients, that it's like microscopic.
Correct.
That's what we're worried about. So.
Yeah. And in fact, the 12-point language came from OPC. We like the idea.
Yeah,
of
yeah.
why
I
we
understand.
added it.
So.
Excuse me, Commissioner Hoover, may I be heard on that issue? Sure. Ruthie Herman, staff. The other reason why I liked OPC's 12-point font is that I joke around with my colleagues. I've been in every state agency, and I was there when dollar now DOL, adopted all of the regs that had to do with the robo-signing and the foreclosure prevention. And that's throughout. So I've seen that throughout state law, the 12-point font. And I was pretty glad that OPC put that in. Because again, casting no aspersions to Mr. Wallace's clients. There are times where someone will put something that's so small.
Sure.
So thank you.
And your problem with the 12-point font is?
It's probably appropriate much of the time. It's just if we put it in the rule as every single, that's the only option, it may not be appropriate in certain types of marketing materials. I think, embedded throughout this is an assumption that, if language is hidden, that's not going to be acceptable. The commission has strong oversight authority over suppliers. There's language coming up that talks about suppliers providing representative marketing materials as part of the application process, and certainly staff could review that. The CAD, is going to, if the customer has a complaint, that's certainly something that the commission can investigate. We don't think that that's going to come up. But I think the concern is just if we're overly prescriptive on specific font requirements that don't contemplate necessarily the various types of media, both print and digital, where a particular font size may not be appropriate. I think everyone, our intention is that customers will be able to read and understand this information, but the 12-point font may not be necessarily appropriate 100% of the time.
Mr. Chair, let me just press back. This is a section for consumer protection. This is a disclosure section. And the fact is, I'm sure most of your clients are fine, upstanding, but this is intended to be, a catch-all so that all disclosures, no matter who's doing it, will have to comply. So again, given that this is a consumer protection section, and these are the important elements of the product that need to be understood, doesn't this seem reasonable? And again, most of your clients are fine, but one of the reasons we're here is because SB1 found that there are a number out there that are not, and they need these protections. So again, Ms. Herman, I think, talked about the fact that this is found in other sections of COMAR, especially in areas related to customer protections.
I mean, again, I think our intent is that this information be, clearly articulated to customers, and if a bad actor were to, to do something to shrink it down and hide it away, and customers weren't seeing it, I think that would be, a violation of this rule that requires you to make these disclosures. My concern is just, in the example of, there's a lot of information here, right? When you look at the text, and we're going to talk about the representative kind of, rec disclosure statements, it's a lot of text to fit into a marketing material, and so, we want to, where we can, and it's appropriate, 12-point font just may not fit. That's the concern. It's not about obfuscating, hiding any information, but when suppliers on the back end are trying to implement this and figure out how to prepare marketing materials and make it clear and readable and legible, and having a little bit of flexibility to try to figure out the best way to do that, to clearly communicate with their customers and get the message across, that's all we're getting at. We're not trying to make it harder for customers to read, certainly.
Okay, well, thank you for that. But, Mr. Chair, I'm kind of inclined to want to support OPC on that. I just think certain sections need to be very uniform and consistent with, I think, the legislation to make it customer protections.
Well, also,
front and center.
this is disclosure, so I'm assuming that the disclosure doesn't necessarily have to be in the marketing material. I mean, that this is information that the customer needs to be able to see. So how is that going to impact your client's preparation of marketing material? I mean, that's going to be, on some level, it's probably better not to have the disclosures in the marketing material. This is, and as Commissioner Richard pointed out, some of why we're here is because of bad actors that were out there. So on some level, we sort of do want to almost bend over backwards to ensure that customer protections are there.
Well, I think the way that we're viewing this, so this is in the advertising and solicitation sections that talks about the disclosures that go into your advertising and solicitation. So we were, I think as I was thinking about it, it looks like this is something that would be required in the marketing materials, not just in the contract, you know, and the disclosures that are made for contracting, but this is part of the, you know, so I guess that's a question, you know, that, and maybe I'm misunderstanding the commission's intent and staff's intent with this proposal.
So I guess so when staff, what does staff do now in terms of marketing materials?
We get marketing materials with an original application, but unless there's, you know, on rare occasion, the commission will direct a party to file, you know, further marketing material, but that's fairly rare. But yeah, you know, we'd see the original material or the proposed material. When they change it 6 months later, we typically don't see that. I will say one thing that might take care of this issue. Currently, before you sign up any supplier or any customer that signs up has to be given a contract summary, which is a one-page summary of the contract, includes information like this. I believe it has to be in 12 font. So conceivably, the supplier could add this language and this detail to that contract summary page, again, in a 12-point font, and be in compliance with this language.
Commissioner Suchman, I think I have an answer to your question. As I'm looking at the statute, in subsection G of 7-707, it requires that the commission adopt regulations that offers of green power for sale to residential retail customers include in the electricity supplier's marketing materials a disclosure written in plain language that explains, and then, so this section is implementing that marketing material disclosure. And the statute says plain language. The statute doesn't say conspicuous manner or 12-point. And that's what prompted our proposed change here.
But my understanding is that the conspicuous and 12-point font language is apparently, as was mentioned earlier, kind of runs through similar offerings by commercial entities when it comes to other products and services. So I guess I'm of a mind to kind of stick with what appears to be state policy when it comes to this. And, you know, as was mentioned earlier, one of the concerns that prompted this legislation in the first place was, you know, questions and objections raised to the current marketing practices by some retail suppliers. And since this is going to be, you know, the first time out, I think we want to make sure that, you know, the customers do in fact understand, you know, what this product is. And so this disclosure statement was supposed to be, you know, the fundamental piece of that process, so that the customer, when they're approached by something, would understand that what the green power marketing and promotional materials were. So I guess I'm of a mind to stick with the conspicuous and 12-point font. So.
Shall I move on then?
Yeah, those are one.
So further down in this section, in subpart 5 here, you know, one of the issues that the supplier community is trying to solve for is, you know, what's the right way to address these various disclosures. And so what the supplier coalition has proposed here in 5 is to say, you know, so there's kind of two pieces to this. In 4F, right at the top of the page here, is, you know, staff had kind of transposed the statutory disclosure language, right? And what the statute says is that you can either provide that language or a similar disclosure approved by the commission. And so as part of this application process, for these green power offers, when a supplier is, you know, applying to provide green power offers, what we're proposing here is that we drafted language that we think is clearer and helps customers understand, you know, how these green power products work. And and that addresses the various requirements in the statute, right? So the statute says, make these types of disclosures, and so we've prepared language that is intended to address those disclosures and give an example. Like, this is what you might put in your marketing material to address the required disclosures in the statute and in the rule. And so in subpart 5 here, we have that proposed language that would be, and again, this would come before the commission as part of this application process. And so we'd like for the commission to add that as an alternative to the other statutory language, because the statute gives those two options.
Right.
And I'll just flag that OPC had some tweaks, some proposed tweaks, slightly different language, similar concept, right? A sort of a default language that if you use this is a way to describe the various aspects of the green power product that the statute requires. And so I think our language was pretty close. But the whole point here is to just make it clear for customers that when they're buying a renewable product, what they're buying is power, electrons from the grid, and then they're getting renewable energy credits that sort of back up that product. And SB1 has some flexibility there. The supplier, as long as, at least to start, right, it's as long as the product is 51% PJM renewable energy credits that are Maryland RPS eligible, that's the baseline, right? And so you can go, anything higher than that meets that statutory requirement. So our language and also OPC's language includes some disclosures that explains the percentages, particularly for like the example of a 51% Maryland RPS eligible REC product. And I'll flag one of the issues that has come up in discussions among the stakeholders is trying to suss out what kinds of products would be eligible under the statute and under these rules. And as an example, a common product might be a national wind product, right? Where you have the RPS requirement that next year is 35.5% tier 1, 2.5% tier 2. Every product has to comply with that, or you pay the alternative compliance penalty. And that includes your tier 1 component, and that has a carve out for solar and for geothermal, and there's an OREC component for that as well that'll be coming in the future. And then there's a tier 2 requirement. So the way that we're sort of understanding the statute is that you have that 35.5% that every product across the board has to achieve. And then to be an eligible green power product, you have to get from, 35.5 tier 1 plus 2.5% tier 2, you have to get all the way up to 51%. And so you bridge that gap with tier 1 or tier 2 Maryland RPS eligible RECs. And then beyond that, there's a question of, well, does it, you certainly, I think everyone would agree that you could use more Maryland RPS eligible RECs, but also, could you use a national wind REC product for the balance of that 49%? If you're disclosing in this section that it's 51% RPS eligible RECs and 49% national wind. Or if you're doing a 51% product, does it have to be 49% brown? Are you somehow prohibited from doing that? And I think our view is that the commission should, allow flexibility to see what customers want, what is available in the market, and to allow suppliers, given that the statute says 51% is the minimum, above that, there should be some flexibility to see, what do customers want, what can suppliers make work. There's a lot of new requirements coming down, and anywhere that we can, sort of implement the statute in good faith and have some flexibility to see what what comes available in the market, I think that's what we're inclined to request, and that's reflected in the comments that we filed in the separate 9757 proceeding. So big picture, this is intended to be a disclosure that covers the statutory disclosure requirements so customers know what they're getting and provides a little bit more color on the breakdown of potential products that may come out.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
If I may, maybe we need to separate because they're two kind of large. There's sort of this disclosure, and then there's sort of the question of are national wind recs basically allowed at all in green power? Maybe we go to that second question first because it's not really addressed in these regs, but it's sort of a fundamental question. I guess OPC's reading of the statute is right 7707C, 1. Our reading of the statute is that if it is, the line of Reese's essentially is that if a supplier has 51% Recs, then or PJM, Maryland RPS certified Recs, that they can offer green power. I think sort of the debate comes in like there's some debate on. I think from OPC's perspective, you could call yourself a supplier could call themselves like offer green, but perhaps not say 100% green, right? Because they're only at 51% of Maryland recs. But it seems odd to from our perspective, from the construction of the statute, I think they have to be allowed to call themselves green if they're at 51%. But then it would be odd to not allow them to call themselves green if they're at 51% Maryland recs and then 49% national wind recs, whatever you think the usefulness of national wind recs are, versus 51% Maryland recs and 49% just brown power. That seems like an odd construction to us. Yeah, our thought is that obviously you can't use national wind recs to get to the 51%. You have to use Maryland RPS certified recs because that's sort of definitionally how the statute works. But sort of what above 51%, it seems to us that any sort of recs could be allowed. I think it'd just be a matter of how they're wording it in their marketing, right? So like I don't know if that you could say 51% Maryland recs and 49% national wind recs and call yourself 100% green or something, but you could maybe call them generically green. That's sort of our view on that. And I'm going to stop there so we can focus on that question.
Well, actually, let me hear from staff first, then I'll come back to you.
Yes, staff believes that for residential customers, all the recs for a renewable product, every rec has to be Maryland, a Maryland certified rec, and that comes from essentially the definition. If you look at SB1 7707A, it states, in this section, green power means energy sources or renewable energy credits that are marketed as clean, green, eco-friendly, environmentally friendly, responsible, carbon-free, renewable, 100% wind, hydro, solar, 100% emission-free, or similar claims. Which strikes me, that means there's virtually no way to market something as green or anything like that without it being these types of recs. And if you go down to, again, C, it states that the electricity supplier that supplies electricity to residential customers may not market that power, the electricity as green power, unless it meets that 51%. And then down at the bottom it says, a renewable under, again, 707C2, E2, start with E1, it states, on or after January 21st, an electric supplier shall purchase RECs for each year that the electric supplier offers green power for sale to residential retail electric customers. And then 2, it states that the RECs purchased under number 1 must be retired into a GATS sub-account. Well, it is impossible to retire a REC into a GATS sub-account unless it, and specifically the one that we can track, unless it has a Maryland certification number. GATS specifically set it up to ensure, I think they set it up for the various states to ensure help them ensure compliance with the RPS. So they wanted to make sure for every state, you can't retire in Maryland unless it has a Maryland certification number. They can't retire one in Pennsylvania unless it has a Pennsylvania certification number.
If I may respond to that, I think OPC and the Supplier Coalition are sort of in agreement on this issue. And I think what we're saying is for the Maryland RPS eligible RECs, which have to be 51%, those would be retired in the reserve sub-account as contemplated in the statute. But it's for the balance of that, whether you call them RECs or energy attributes or whatever it may be, those would not constitute Maryland RPS eligible regs, right? But the fundamental question here is, is the commission going to require a 51% product to be paired only with brown power, or is there going to be an opportunity for customers that may not want to pay for Tier 1 SRECs that are several fold more expensive than national wind regs? Climate change is a global issue, right? And renewable energy from Texas or California or the Midwest, may not directly affect the grid here in Maryland in the same way that a local resource would. And I think the statute contemplates that they really want to push that up to 51% to make sure that local resources are getting that that focus here. But the General Assembly very clearly left 49% open, and it requires, if you look at the language here, it requires in the description of the disclosures, you have to explain the percentage that is RPS eligible, contemplating that there will be a component that is not, and to explain how that portion complies with the laws and regulations in Maryland. So this again goes to sort of thinking about the market structure as a whole, and how prescriptive do we want to be when the General Assembly could have said it has to be 100% RPS eligible regs, right? And instead they chose to put that at 51% to leave some flexibility. And I think under staff's interpretation, the only option for a 51% product would be a brown power product. And how is that better for Maryland than a 49% national wind product would be? I mean, it's not.
On that point, I essentially agree with, Reese. It just seems odd that you could have a 51%, Maryland product and then the rest brown power and call it green, and then 51% and 49% national wind regs, again, whatever you think the usefulness of those are, and not call that green. It seems a little strange to us. On 707, I guess staff's point on 707E1, it just says, on and after January 1, 2025, an electricity supplier shall purchase renewable energy credits for each year they offer green power, but doesn't really specify in what number, like, shall only purchase. It just says shall purchase. It doesn't, I think it's unclear if that's requiring every single rec in any sort of green product to be a PJM rec. Yeah, and again, I think it's just sort of I think our concern is the construction of 51% and 49% brown power equals green, 51%, 49% whatever else, some sort of rec, not green. Seems strange.
Well, okay, I am confused about where we are in the proposed regs. 'Cause I feel like we're
kind of not
I feel like we're
proposed regs.
bouncing around in different places. So, I mean, if we could go back, this would be much easier for me to understand. If we can just go back to the disclosure, which, and because that, I see that as very different than what is permissible under the statute and the regs, will be the regs. And so I'm just finding Risa's proposed language a little confusing and maybe a little misleading. I understand I agree with the point of sort of making differentiation between what is clean energy, green energy, and what is green eligible energy for RPS. So that to me is a different matter than the disclosure language. In looking at the language, I just feel like the language, I understand your point about the percentage. I'm just not sure it's the right place to discuss the percentage. And the concern I have is that the language is drafted sort of implies that a customer is buying renewable energy, which they're not. They're buying the attributes. You can't buy renewable energy unless you have a PPA. And so maybe you can tighten the language up, but it seems this language is misleading, or at least in the way that I read it. So I'm a little concerned about that.
I mean, and I think that one of the confusing aspects of this is how renewable energy certificates work and how that's paired with energy. And so, there's certainly an option.
That's the question is it paired with energy? I mean, what is it that you are, I mean, other than, I mean, it's rare, I think, other than, I mean, other than a PPA, I mean, when are there situations where the energy is paired with the credits?
Yeah, so the way that the RPS is structured and the way that, we've operated in this marketplace since the inception of the RPS is that suppliers procure, including, wholesale suppliers and utilities for SOS purposes, procure the RECs that are necessary to match their RPS compliance obligations. And they retire those RECs, and when they do that, the REC represents the environmental attributes, the renewable environmental attributes of that generation. And so that is separated from the actual power when that REC is created, right? And then it is paired on the back end in the compliance phase with the energy that was delivered to a customer. And so when a customer, if I'm a customer and I buy electricity and it is paired with 100% RECs, then I'm buying 100% renewable energy.
Right, but it's not paired.
It
is you're because that energy doesn't get, you don't color the energy as it goes into onto the grid. I mean it gets mixed up with everything else, and I just and this is a hard enough concept to explain to customers, which I think this is what this paragraph, the disclosure statement, is trying to do, is to say to a customer, you're not buying renewable energy. You're buying energy and you're supporting renewable power. And I'm just concerned that your language is confusing that. And this is, I mean, we can talk about what's eligible in a different place, but I think you're mixing them up. And so I think the whole point of this is to try to give clarity to what's going on, because if you ask the average person who's buying renewable energy, they think they're buying renewable energy and they're not. And so that's some of what I think we're trying to do here. Your additional language is just making it more confusing. So I understand what you're trying to do, and we can deal with that in another section. This is really just about trying to explain to a customer what they're buying and what they're not buying.
And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to make it clear to the customer that they are not necessarily getting electrons from a solar facility when they buy a product.
They're not getting electrons from that solar facility. They're getting electrons.
Right, they're getting grid power, and a portion of that is solar, just like all their neighbors, right? And there's no way that, unless they have a behind-the-meter system, we can't guarantee that electrons that come to their house will come from any particular source.
But
Right.
you understand what I think.
Yeah.
I mean, I think adding more and more, I think your language just makes it more confusing for the average customer, because I had to parse through it to understand what you're proposing, and some of it suggests that they are actually buying renewable energy. They're not.
Well, they're buying renewable energy attributes that are paired with their energy, and under the RPS, the General Assembly has said that when you make that pairing, right, when you match energy with a renewable energy credit, that's renewable energy.
Okay, so they're not really. It's okay. I think for disclosure purposes, for that customer, we just need to just try to make the language as clear as possible and deal with the issues around what you can market in a different section.
Chair Hoover, may I be heard on this issue? So thank you, Commissioner Suchman. Mr. Mosier, while he didn't have concerns about their exact language, we have been talking about this for weeks, and I can forward to your council the section in the bill so you can see it. It actually quotes what the disclosure could be, and by the standard rules of statutory interpretation, that's so clear that they want that to be the disclosure. And I just might add that
That's what this language is.
no, but that's what the
That's what F
yes, ma'am.
is.
Yes, F is,
Okay.
and it's exactly lifted from the statute,
Yeah.
and the statute has quotes around it. And in 15 years or 20 years of working in Annapolis and reviewing legislation, I don't recall seeing that. I'd like to be wrong that it's somewhere in some statute.
You would interpret that as legislative intent that language
Yes,
be
ma'am.
disclosure language.
And I would
Okay.
be worried. I've advised our division, and I would be worried about anything that isn't that. I say or similar, but it's in quotes. It better be that or maybe an and or. I would advise the commission to use that for that reason. And thank you.
Okay.
Actually, this discussion on this part of the is actually been very well had at this point. I also just differentiate the disclosure from marketing, and I think the disclosure language is quite clear. And I think we need to be very cautious if we're going to deviate from it at all. And so I think it kind of requires us to again stick with this disclosure, okay? And then we can talk about what can be said in marketing. But again, that's how I kind of split this particular question and find we should stay there. I don't know if we're going to talk next about the what the product can look like, but that's I just wanted to agree with Ms. Herman and or what Commissioner Suchman was saying.
Commissioners, if I may, and apologies for this, OPC filed a, like late last night, essentially this morning, a proposed disclosure that I think improves on RISA's version, because we sort of understand, because there's two sort of disclosure sections in 7707, one that has the exact quote, and then another one that says that there should be disclosures that say what they're paying, what the customer's actually paying for, and essentially A through E, and what's in the A through E in the regs. And I think our thought was that it would be preferable to have some sort of form language that would cover it all, so that we don't have to have suppliers coming in with 20 different versions of the disclosure and then having to figure out, is this good, is this one okay, is this one okay, and sort of litigate that constantly. So we had a disclosure. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at it, or Kevin, can you pull it up?
When did this come in?
Sorry, this morning.
Yeah.
It's
Oh.
yeah.
I'm pulling it up.
Okay.
I guess the question is, are you okay about just keeping the language that staff is proposing? Or do you feel like that language needs to be modified?
I mean, I think our proposed disclosure essentially covers everything that's in the in the statute and the language that staff had. And we just think it's a little more intelligible. In our opinion, it's a little more intelligible than what was
So-
in the statute. But
All right, so let me just kind of figure out where everybody is. So I take it RISA is fine with OPC's modification of what was your language?
I mean, we've just
No, I understand you're
Been
just
looking
reading,
at
but,
it,
but
but
it looks pretty similar to what
it's pretty
RISA
close.
Yep,
Yeah. So there may be some subtle differences there that are meaningful, but certainly as compared to not having
Right.
an alternative language, it appears to be in the ballpark of ours.
And so for staff, I mean, do you have a problem with that?
I don't think from a policy standpoint, again, as Ms. Herman said, and when the legislature puts something in quotes, we assume they put it in quotes for a reason. At the end of the day, and I think, Commissioner Schuschman hit it on the head, currently most customers, if not virtually every customer, residential anyway, who signs up for a renewable product, I think most of them think that we're actually getting their electricity from a wind farm. As long as whatever disclosure is used makes it clear that the electricity you're getting is not it's not different than your next door neighbors. It's from the grid. What you're doing is, to further renewables, they are purchasing for every megawatt hour you use, they're purchasing a renewable energy credit, which is the attributes of generation from a facility that you may or may not ever get electricity from. And as long as that's clear and customers don't think, oh, hey, my electricity is coming from the local wind farm, I think we're okay with it. We just want to make sure that distinction is made, regardless of the language.
Change either one of your minds?
Well, I just, again, I go back to the simplicity and the fact that it is in the law at this point. This is what the legislature, just, termed, that was understandable to them, and what ought to be communicated to their constituents. So I still tend to want to stick with what's in the law for a disclosure. But again, I'll weigh staff, opinion heavily on this one.
I guess if there's consensus, that helps.
Yeah, I think just the bottom line for us is that, the statute has some form language, and it says, or similar language approved by the commission. And I think what both OPC and the Supplier Coalition have done is to try to take the foundation that's in the statute and to also address the other articulated items in the following section G, and kind of put that together into a standard, easy to understand disclosure that is going to help customers to avoid the confusion, Commissioner Suchman, that you're concerned about, which is you're not getting electrons from any particular resource. That there's, our disclosure starts right out by explaining that, and then we get into explaining what the RECs are and how they work. So, that's what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to kind of have a standardized framework so that, virtually every, or every customer in Maryland, when they're getting renewable energy offers, if they're getting green offers, they're getting the same message about what that means.
All right, so let me ask a process question for staff. If we decided to go with this, do we have to revise the draft regulations in order to drop that in there? Or?
I believe you could just, if you liked the OPC language, I think you could just cut and paste that into the existing, where we have F, just take that quote out and put in a quote for OPC's language.
Sorry, and to sort of Commissioner Suchman's point about pairing, I noticed I would probably take out in our proposed language, I noticed instead in the third line, where it says, instead, the energy your home uses will be paired with, I think we could take out will be paired with and say, the energy your home uses supports renewable energy sources. Yeah.
That's fine. The whole point is that your usage will determine the number of RECs you need. That gets a little too complicated, so. It's the pairing suggests that you're getting both.
Yeah.
And they're not.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
In terms of the way that this is addressed, what the Supplier Coalition proposed, and I think what OPC's, comments were proposing an alternative to, we had proposed keeping the statutory language as under F and adding a new subpart 5 here that says, here's, and because our language and OPC's language provides much more detail and addresses the other things that are in, A, B, C, D, E, and F. And so under 5, we're saying, if you include this language, this is a way to explain to customers the stuff that you're required to disclose under the statute. So that's the idea, would be that, you could come up with your own language, or use the statutory language there, or you could have this, this kind of sort of fulsome disclosure that's right in the rule that would be, a standardized way to explain green power products of varying percentages of resources. And so we've got some fields in there to that effect, and OPC did too.
So now I'm confused. All right, so you would propose to keep F?
Yep.
And then just add another?
Yes.
Even though this, I had the sense that the OPC language was intended to replace the language in F.
it's sort of intended to replace the language in F and also cover everything A, B, C, D, and E require.
I think we're okay either way. I just wanted to be clear about
Sure.
the way that we had proposed to set this up in our red line.
It certainly makes it easier to, I mean, and that could just be the standard language. Does that make sense? Yeah, okay. So then it would just be for, and after disclose, it would just be these two paragraphs.
Yeah, I think that
Okay.
would work, yeah.
Makes sense to me.
Does that work for you?
And
I can work with that.
All right.
there's another typo in there.
Okay, yeah.
But yeah.
Well, I think there's a way that we
Yeah,
can
please fix the
make
typo.
Yeah, there's a typo.
other changes that are not substantive changes, so. Okay, all right.
Consensus, good.
Okay. What's,
So as we move down, we're skipping over the internet and telephone solicitation sections. Down in 2053-07-15, this is where the regulations discuss the process to get approved to offer green power products. And so the statute has a number of requirements for these applications. You know, the general changes that we are proposing here are to, align the language in the rules and cross-reference what's in the statute rather than sort of repeat and rephrase it in the rules. One of the concerns in Section 4 here is that it would require in an application that you provide, and this isn't in the statute, so the statute does require that you describe, in Section 5 there, you describe the electricity being marketed, including the green power source and percentage, and you describe how that complies with state law and regulations. The issue with 4 is that it is too prescriptive for an upfront green power offering structure. So on the back end, when you report your compliance, you identify very specifically where your RECs are coming from, and there's a REC tag in PJM GATS that identifies the generation source and the year that it was generated and so forth. What the statute requires up front is a little more general, providing a description. So, when suppliers are offering a product, they're looking at a portfolio of, some suppliers have their own generation resources, some suppliers buy from the market, but they manage a portfolio across, and these are residential customers, right? So for a particular residential customer, having some flexibility to say, we're going to describe this as a Maryland, or a PJM wind or a national, or a, describing the type of product without necessarily pinning down the fuel type and year generated for the REC that will be retired on the back end for that product, because you may not necessarily know before you even bring your green power product to market. You'll have a sense of how you're structuring it, but you may not know exactly what the fuel type and year for that particular REC will be. And under the RPS, there's a compliance window, right? RECs are good for, I believe, 3 years. And so the idea here is let's provide a description, and address the statutory requirements without, expecting that a supplier is going to have procured all of the RECs up front and be able to pinpoint exactly what the fuel type and year generated will be for green power products before they're even offered.
If I can, this was like a holdover from previous language, and I don't have necessarily have a problem with taking the full.
well,
out.
actually, let me ask this question. So this is going to be the submission that the retail supply entity is going to make to staff to make their determination that the green power offer is legitimate, correct?
Correct.
So I guess I need to hear from you as to whether or not you think this proposal is going to allow you to do what we're required to do under the statute.
I believe so. And I'm okay deleting this language. The one part, and this is just kind of an issue with SB1. SB1 explicitly requires that certain things, the customer being informed, certain information about the RECs that are going to be used. Well, when it comes to complying with the RPS, the suppliers, they kind of know what, a lot of them know what their sales are going to be. And same thing with the utilities, know what their sales are going to be for the year. So they don't necessarily buy it all up front, they buy it throughout the year. Well, the same thing, because of that, a supplier, it's going to be difficult for them to explicitly say, hey, look, we're getting wind recs from Ohio that were generated in 2024. That maybe is difficult to do. On the other hand, I think SB1 pretty clearly requires it, so they're going to have to figure out a way to disclose it in such a manner. But I think, the staff's biggest concern here is when we get an application, we want to make sure, we'll already know everything when they do retire those recs, we'll know everything we need to know about those recs and can make sure they comply with whatever marketing, however they're marketing them. Our bigger concern is, when it comes to this application, the future proceeding to make sure that it's going to be in compliance with the cap. So I think, the type of recs, I think we can kind of figure out that, based on the marketing material. But yeah, our bigger concern is the future issue with the cap.
So, any questions from either one of you? Commissioner Sussman?
Right, so I mean, there are already limits on the kinds of recs that they can get anyway. So sort of fuel type, I mean, we're not going to get any greater protections for customers because they have to meet certain requirements anyway.
That's my belief, yes.
Okay, yeah, so 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 this just seems overly prescriptive and maybe would be hard for them to comply with anyway, and so it sounds like everybody is okay with getting rid of the.
Staff is.
Okay.
The-
Good, then, if that, we're also fine with that, yeah.
And you're fine too?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, so we'll do that.
So the next edit, I think, is also a consensus edit with a tweak to what we have here. So what the staff language has is, providing represented marketing materials, right? And that's something that is part of the current supplier application. The way that it works now under the current supplier application is if you have developed your marketing materials at the time you apply for a license, you provide those. If you haven't developed them yet, then the commission will typically issue a letter order approving the license and directing the applicant to provide the marketing materials when they're developed to staff and to OPC before beginning operations in the state. And so I think the idea here is that we would do something similar. If you've already, and one of the big issues from the retail supplier community is trying to navigate all of these different aspects. And if you don't even know if your green power product is going to be acceptable, having gone through and developed all of the final versions of the marketing materials, you may not have those yet, right? We've got disclosure language that is certainly something we're talking about, and ultimately that will be developed. But I think the idea is, let's just kind of echo what is currently the practice for supplier licensing generally. And if it's ready, provide it to staff. If not, you can move forward and get your green power offering approved, and then staff and OPC would want to see sample marketing materials.
All right, so let me
on back.
skip to you. I mean, is that something that you find feasible and acceptable?
Yeah, I find that acceptable. Again, as he said, we do it for supplier applications. We could do it the same way. And I think essentially the rule says, yeah, if you don't have marketing material, provide it prior to offering. So, staff and OPC would get a copy of it before they would start offering. And if we saw something objectionable, we'd, again, send something down to the commission saying.
But I guess my question is, so they have been supplying the information later, even if they make this promise. And I want to make sure that, I don't want to have a situation where they say, well, we don't have it here, we'll get it to you later. They never bothered to do that. We forget, and then,
And I think in this instance, a lot of the times when that happens, it's a broker who, never actually does have. But for this, since it'd be such a smaller number of suppliers, we would make sure, and I'm sure OPC as well, that we'd follow up. And, if someone didn't have marketing material, we're going to check with those few green power providers.
all right. And, I mean, do you have any view on this?
I agree with that. I think I would just put in probably at the end of the regs here some language to the effect of, if training material marketing material is not available at the time of the application, provide such before commencing business in the state. I'm quoting from the current application, so yeah.
That works for you? Yeah. Okay, all right. Sounds good.
So this section D is intended to help suppliers, kind of get through the process and get to market when they are developing a green power product, and to have some clarity around the timing and mechanics. I'll flag there's a section in the middle here that staff was concerned about the initial green power pricing. And so I think this section kind of ties into the pending proceeding in 9757 to figure out what is the commission's approved green power price going to be. And above that price, suppliers would have to come in and get approval. The big picture challenge is that, it's, early November now. We've got if a supplier wants to offer a green power product starting at the beginning of 2025, we still don't know what the pricing will be for that. And so the idea here is that we're going to say, if you file an application and your price is at or below the commission's approved price, then, staff can look at that. If there are any concerns, the commission can issue a procedural order and set it out for a procedural process. If not, then there's a timeline by which, it'll be reviewed and approved or deemed approved. With the whole idea being, if you are setting your price below that ceiling, then you have some flexibility and more of a streamlined review process to be able to bring that product to market quickly and efficiently, so that it can be available for residential customers in Maryland. And then under E, if your price is above that ceiling, the statute requires that you provide some additional information. And so, big picture, as we're looking at this next section, staff's proposed rules had a whole bunch of information that some of it is consistent with the statute, some of it is different. I don't know that we object. I mean, what we're saying here is, for the purposes of the regs, let's cross-reference the statute and those requirements, and then the commission's application form can require whatever information the commission may deem appropriate. But there was a lot of things that were in this rule that didn't necessarily marry up with the statute. And as we're moving forward, I think the idea was we wanted to kind of have the rules cross-reference the statute and be consistent with the statute, and to provide a process for suppliers to move through this process to actually be able to bring these green power products to market. And the 150% trailing average SOS price as the cap is, that comes from the statute. That's the ceiling on the commission-approved price. And in the Supplier Coalition's comments that were filed in case number 9757, we also recommended that the commission use that as an interim benchmark to allow there to be some products that can come into the market until the commission has had a chance to do a fulsome review of the various statutory and market factors that are contemplated in the statute, and kind of set that framework that can then be updated annually going forward.
Yeah, I think staff is broadly okay with this, except for, on D, for instance, everything here I'm highlighting, the 150%, that's where staff has an objection, particularly a rather strenuous objection, in fact. Because the current SOS price is, 10 or 11 cents, 50% above that would mean that they could charge a 5 cent per kilowatt hour premium over the SOS. Well, the suppliers, or the Suppliers Coalition is also arguing that they should be able to buy national wind recs. Well, I was kind of curious the other day. I went on, looked up Oklahoma wind recs. I'm from Oklahoma, which is why I picked there. You can buy an Oklahoma wind rec for 50 cents. Well, they want to be able to charge a 5 cent premium for something that cost 0.005%. So, and that is potentially a 10,000% surcharge.
If I can just ask, if this 150% was changed to 100%, so it has to meet the SOS, would you have less of a concern?
I would be perfectly fine with that.
Okay.
And I will say too, I think, staff is, working, and I think we can quickly have our cap in place. I think we've put a proposal in front of the commission. But again, I think that 150% is just, that allows for, I won't say price gouging, but given how cheap national wind recs are, 5 cents versus 5/100% potentially, that's,
Okay, and so, Mr. Wallace, I mean, if you were to, have that 150%, where you'd actually have to have a commission proceeding so that you could explain why. I mean, you're asking for a sort of an approval process that doesn't require your members to wait. If they meet the 100%, then maybe that's a way for them to get their products into the marketplace. But if they're asking for more than 100%, it just seems to me that we're going to have to look to see what the reasons are for that bump up.
I think we need to take a little step back here. I mean, what this is saying is that the green power offer would be capped at 150% of the SOS price, right? The SOS price is based on, the energy cost, but for the rec component, it is the RPS only. It's not 51%.
No, but what I'm saying is you want it to be deemed approved. So you want a streamlined process.
Yep.
And it just seems to me that if you want a streamlined process, then we all have to feel okay that there is no possibility of price gouging. And it seems to me that you won't have that if it has to meet the SOS. But if you want to go above the SOS, then you have to come to us and explain to us why it needs to go above the SOS. And it may be a perfectly, maybe you want to have 100% of Maryland solar, and customers are willing to spend 150% above SOS. That's fine, but we'd have to approve it.
But the issue is that the SOS price is well below even the least expensive green power product, because the SOS price RPS target is much lower, right? It's 35% versus 51%. So if you're going to say that a 51% product, there's going to be 0 products that would ever use that if it was 100% of the SOS.
Well, it's not going to be 0 products. You're just going to have to get approval from the commission. I mean, the whole point of you want a streamlined process, but as Commissioner Richard pointed out, the reason why we have SB1 is because there were problems in the market. And we're trying to make sure that there are no problems in the market. And we can't even have like a whiff of the potential for price gouging. I mean, I don't know another way to prevent that other than to have your members come and explain why it has to be 150% above SOS, and they may have a perfectly good reason for doing that, and we will then approve it.
Okay, I just wanted to make it clear that if it's 100%, there's going to be 0. I mean, it's almost not worth putting.
No, there may be 0 that are deemed approved without having to come to the commission for approval. I mean, you're asking for a streamlined process, and this is the only way I think I can see that we can protect ratepayers, if you want a streamlined process.
What we're proposing here is that under any of these scenarios, the commission can look at any applicant that comes in and decide not to do the streamlined option, right? We're not.
It says it shall be deemed approved.
But it says the commission may issue an order within 7 days of the filing.
So we'd have to
Yeah, you would look at it and say, okay.
Would you guys be able to get something to us in 7 days? That just seems like, I'm sorry, I don't think that's going to work. I mean, they're so overworked now, and so they would actually literally be doing all of their work on these applicants that come in. I mean, if they all want to, if every one of your members wants something deemed approved, and all of a sudden they have, 300 applications and they have 7 days to get back to us, that's not going to work.
I understand. I don't think that that's going to happen. I think that it's very likely to be the far other end of the spectrum, given everything that the supplier community is trying to figure out with.
But you can't promise us
implications
that,
as we want.
and I wouldn't expect you to be able to, and so I just feel like
I think big picture, if, if the process now is similar to, for example, what we see with a community solar project applying, where you apply and it can take 3 to 4 months to get approved, it's going to be too late for that product to come to the market because the market will have shifted.
Mr. Wallace, I mean,
So-
our responsibility right now, because of SB1, I mean, our responsibility anyway was to protect ratepayers. But with SB1, we really have to make sure that whatever we put in place now is going to protect ratepayers. And you just heard this example of how customers can be price gouged. I mean, I'm sure we could spend all day coming up with other examples if you have something like 150%, and then what is the percent above SOS where we're feeling comfortable? I don't know that we can do that. So it just seems to me that if they can match the SOS price, then they can be deemed approved, but otherwise they have to come to us for approval. I just don't see another way around it. I mean, I don't know where my fellow commissioners are on this.
I'm with staff on this.
Well, and for what it's worth, I can't say how quickly, staff will process these and, go through all of our approval process. What I can say is EAP will work through these as quickly as possible. We will try to, if we get a filing, we'll try to have a recommendation up to our executive director and staff council within a couple of weeks.
If I may, I think the thing that's concerning, as you raised with sort of the 7-day thing, the 100, well, we're talking about the 100% would only apply if there's no price baseline established. Like the commission hasn't established a price baseline for green power. And, I think OPC agrees with, changing it from the 150 to 100. So like if there's no green power price baseline established, then, you have to meet SOS. I think what we're a little concerned with the whole 7, if we keep the commission may issue an order within 7 days, right? I don't know if that's enough time for staff to evaluate, if there is a baseline established, right? But there's something, maybe wrong with their marketing, or I don't know, whatever. Is that? I'm not sure if that's enough time for staff to come in and say, commission, we need to make an order to, establish a case to.
Oh, okay, so
yeah.
if I'm understanding correctly, so you wouldn't want this section at all, even if it's below the, we're going to set annually a cap on green products.
Yep.
If a product is below that cap, what I'm reading this to mean is that it would, be deemed eligible unless the commission wants to take action. So
I don't know if
you're saying you don't even want us to go that far.
I don't necessarily have a problem with it in concept. I just like the 7 days. Maybe it should be longer. Is my.
Yeah,
Yeah.
14 days?
Well,
then?
but-
Oh, okay.
But the only thing your initial view was that you actually could do that in 7 days if we made it 100%, correct?
Yeah, I mean, if it's 100%, well, I don't know that we necessarily, again, it would have to go to an admin meeting. So if something like that was filed on, a Tuesday, it would have to be approved, by the next Tuesday, or actually, I guess the next Monday. Clearly, that's, if a filing comes on a Tuesday, it'd have to be on the next day's admin, which of course we cannot do. So the 7 days, that's not feasible just because, depending on the day of the week it was filed. But again, if it's below 100%, I don't know that the days matter that much, because if it's below the SOS cap, I'm fine deeming it on 1 day's notice as long as it's below the cap. And then if we looked at it and saw that it in fact was not below the cap, then I think that's a clear violation. We bring them in and issue the appropriate fine.
Well, again, what I think OPC wants to avoid is, 100% of the SOS cap. If there's no baseline established, that's fine. But but eventually the commission is going to establish a baseline for a green power price that's higher than standard SOS. And I think what we want to avoid is basically automatically approving somebody who claims that they're, offering some green product, but actually isn't. When you dig deeper into it, but 7 days enough to actually dig deeper into it. 14 days maybe.
Okay.
I mean, the whole concept here is, having an expedited process so that these products can actually make it to market while they're still viable. And so whether it's 7 days or 10 days, I think the whole idea was that we want to, especially, down the road, right? The initial tranche of projects may take a deeper review. right? But if, 5 years from now, if you've got a green power product you want to bring to the market, if it's a supplier that the commission has licensed and knows and has seen them operating in this market, being able to move quickly, is important for there to be a viable market for these products for customers. And so that's what we're trying to achieve here.
Well, so let me put it this way. This is the first substantial change to this process since it was started. And I guess I'm of the opinion that I'd rather walk before we start running. So I'm willing to create this expedited process that you're talking about, as long as we have the limit that Commissioner Sushman's talked about. Now, going forward, if it seems like things are working, I think we can revisit this situation and maybe, expand it and do that. But at least for the initial tranche of offerings, I want the assurance that, that customers are not going to get victimized by this. So I guess my view is that we make it not 150 but 100, and keep it within the 7 days or whatever, and then after we start seeing what the offerings are, if we need to revisit it, we'll do that. So
I think that's reasonable.
So you do want an expedited process? You do want to have an
If it's
expedited
100%.
yeah, if it's 100%.
But even for the green product?
Yeah.
Below the.
Yeah, right.
And what's staff's view on the edits that we had down under D to cross-reference the statute?
You mean E?
At the bottom of D here.
Okay. Well, again,
That's E.
my objection is.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Okay, which, we're looking at D or E?
E
Right.
at the bottom of the page.
Okay. Yeah, I think if the 150%, this section is deleted, then I'm okay with this. Yeah, again, it's just the 100, if the 150% is changed to 100%, there is nothing in D or E that I object to.
I guess it'd be 100%. Because it basically mirrors the D language. Because if the commission has not established a price in accordance with the baselining, then 100%.
Yeah,
Right, yeah.
Yeah, these two were intended to sort of.
Right, yeah, I understand.
Fit
And
together.
so, yeah, we should make them consistent, yeah.
So then if we continue down at the bottom of this section, a little further down.
Okay, were you looking, do we need to make this
Um,
smaller so you can see a note?
No, it was down just at the end of all that language, there was some more. Yeah, so down here in 3, there was a similar kind of concept regarding the deemed approval mechanic. So D is the first tranche of projects that are below the commission price cap. E is the products that would be above the price cap, for which there's a lot more information that
All
is
right.
included in the filing under the statute and would be part of this section E.
So I guess the question is, can you live with 45 days, or?
I think 45 days is fine. And, worst case scenario, if it turned out we were getting too many of these and we were overly swamped, we would just, start sending out a request to the company, either agree to postpone this, at an admin meeting, or we're just going to recommend denial. But again, I think 45 days should be plenty of time. If we fall behind, again, we'll just start saying, look, you're going to have to give us more time, or it's denial.
Does that work? Okay. Sure. All right, sounds good.
And then I think we're nearing the end here in terms of Reese's comments. So this section is the consumer protection provision under the RPS regulations. And what we're proposing here is that these green power requirements under SB1 apply specifically to residential customers and not to commercial customers. So we've added references to residential customers to make it clear that these are specifically implementing the SB1 requirements for residential customers consistent with the statute. And so that was the critical piece here. And then we were discussing, that's under A1. Under A2, we were discussing this one with staff this morning. I think if I'm understanding, and Mr. Mosier can correct me if I'm wrong here, but my understanding is that the idea with this provision is that it would apply to, if you had one of these 51% RPS eligible REC plus 49% wind product, where you had some kind of a renewable energy attribute that was not a Maryland RPS eligible REC, staff would want to see that in a report at the end of the year to be able to audit that. That would also apply to a commercial customer. So I believe that what staff's view was that they were okay with this if we removed residential under A2, and what they're looking to get is information about voluntary renewable products for commercial customers there, as well as this kind of, above 51% or above the minimum portion that may be from markets outside of.
Well, I can tell you, since I was in the room when there was discussion about the commercial customers, that they showed up with a lot of representatives saying that they were perfectly happy with the way the process was working and didn't need anybody's protection and didn't want it. So I think, the point about this needing to be focused on residential customers is that's why the bill got passed. So the upshot from the legislature was the commercial guys say they can figure this out on their own. So fine, we're going to let them do that. So.
Yeah, well, first, I've got no objection to the changes they're making in A or A1. A2, my view was this does apply to commercial customers, but again, it's all the language was saying here was for all of the renewable products that are not a green product to residential customers. Well, currently what we require, and again, this is a requirement for commercial customers, or for green products offered to commercial customers currently, we require that the supplier send us a marketed renewable sales report, and essentially all it is just a verification, an affidavit saying we retired enough RECs to meet our obligation. This goes a little bit farther in that it requires them to provide certain information about those RECs. And it's, I think, it was things like, I think the state generated, there was a few things in SB1 that were, but again, I think A2 has to remove residential customers because I don't believe, A2 refers to, RECs and a green product that does not qualify under PUA 7701. And again, I don't believe a residential customer can be marketed to as having a green product unless they're purchasing RECs that do qualify under 7701.
Any other thoughts on this? No?
The only other thought that I wanted to flag here is the title of this section is consumer protection. Mm-hmm. And so the various consumer protections throughout, the Consumer Protection Act and the Commission's regulations apply those to residential customers. Mm-hmm. And so, part of the reason that we included the residential specific language here was to make it clear that this is for residential customers. That's critical for the green power provisions. But if the commission were inclined to apply this certain portions of this more broadly to non-residential customers, I think it would be helpful to maybe change the title from consumer protection to, something like renewable energy reporting or something like that. Maybe we could take a look at what might be appropriate, but just to move away from the consumer protection language, which suggests that it's for residential customers only.
So I guess the question is whether, so this is information that staff would need.
Yes, certainly in A, in A1 and yeah.
No, but I'm just, this is information that you need. It's not necessarily a consumer protection issue. It's just, you just want to make sure that the supplier is complying with the requirements.
Right, both the requirements I think for a green product and also the requirements for an for the RPS. And I will say some of the language farther down in 20610401 is probably now superfluous because whether or not the COMAR requires it, you can't retire a rec into the GAT system that doesn't provide us with all sorts of information.
Yeah, so if you're getting that information anyway, through GAT, would you be getting that information, the kind of information that you would get through A2?
A2, no. Everything in A1 we'd get, but the information in A2 we would not, because again, A2, in my view, applies to commercial and industrial customers. And for commercial and industrial customers, you could purchase a National Wind Rec. And again, the only recs we see are the ones retired in that GAT sub-account that staff has access to.
Okay. It does seem like the kind of information that staff does need.
I agree.
So I guess the question is, I think we need to have something that's called consumer protection because that's kind of the purpose of SB1. So is there another way to capture this? Ms. Herman?
Yeah, I think consumer protections are at the core of a lot of the stuff we've been talking about, but just not, this is the report.
It's kind of more like, it's sort of a compliance issue.
Yeah.
So,
Commissioner Suchman, yeah, thank you. Mr. Wallace asked Kevin and myself about it this morning, and I'm just a worrywart, a Jewish mother. I'm just worried about changing.
you and me both.
Yeah, right. So my instincts, without having to read it and really think about it and talk to my colleagues, is I never want to take the words consumer protection out of any law.
Yeah.
So we talked about this morning, and I appreciate Mr. Wallace bringing it up. I'm uncomfortable making a comment about it now. I'd like permission to think about it over the weekend.
Right. It doesn't sound like, Mr. Wallace, you don't have a problem with having this information provided to staff. It's just a question of where it's most appropriate. So maybe this is just a drafting thing. So maybe folks can take it back and sort of figure out where it's most appropriately addressed.
Yeah, the most critical thing here is we want to avoid inadvertently applying all of the green power restriction to commercial customers. That's the key thing. And I think that we've addressed in A1. The A2 piece is really just about, if it's not really a consumer protection section, if it also is going to apply to commercial customers, I just thought that, it's a little confusing for suppliers that are reading this to try to.
Well, that's what I'm wondering. Is it really a consumer protection issue, or is it really just a compliance issue for both residential and commercial? So maybe that whole section needs to just go someplace else.
And Commissioner Suchman, may I be heard on one more point on this?
Please.
Respectfully to council, I've been in every other state agency, right? So I had the privilege of working on the Consumer Protection Act, which is in the commercial law article. And none of those provisions apply to a commercial setting. They just don't by definition. Now, this is a different place. It's very specific, but I don't think that you have to worry about that because by definition, the Maryland Consumer Protection Act doesn't apply to commercial activity. But I can understand their concern. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure that I share that.
No, but I'm just thinking, I mean, this just seems like a compliance issue.
Yeah.
And so maybe there's just a way to put this into, is there a section in the regs about compliance?
Sure.
And then maybe just moving that there.
Yeah, I think you're correct. It is much more compliance than consumer protection.
All right, why don't we do that?
The only final comment here is at the end, at the very bottom of our document, we had that the corresponding change to the gas rules on regulation of pricing, and that's not based on green power. That's based on, SB1, and just being consistent. If we're going to change it on the electricity side, we recommend changing it on the gas side too, because that is no longer going to apply effective January 1st.
Yeah, no objection from staff.
Okay, all right.
I think the only other issue remaining on the table, it just isn't in Reese's, is regarding the 2061 scope of 0107 scope of applicability section.
And pardon me, Chair Hoover, I believe that SMECO's attorney are here
Oh, yeah,
to address
yeah,
that.
right.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, so I guess, this staff's recommendation was to essentially carves out SMECO from the green power offering, or the green power, regulations and requirements. On our original filed comments, we had a lot of discussion about utilities and not being allowed to offer something that's green and not SOS, and SMECO's comments essentially say that doesn't apply to SMECO. We agree with that. However, there was a paragraph at the end of our comments that essentially our interpretation of the statute of 7707 is that it does apply to SMECO by definition, because 7707 uses the language of an electricity supplier shall, that offers green power shall do this or that, and in 1101 of PUA, an electricity supplier is defined as including an electric company, which includes SMECO, and then 7707B has some carve-outs for DGS and a community choice aggregator and commercial retail electric customers, carving out, accepting these particular companies from, or applications from the green power requirements in the statute, but SMECO isn't in that specific carve-out, and because SMECO would be covered under the we think SMECO is part of what an electricity supplier is by definition. By definition, 7707 we think applies to SMECO. Whether I'm not actually sure we even necessarily or that have that much of a feeling about whether or not it logically should, but I think by definition it does. So I don't think we can create a carve out for them in the regulations when it doesn't exist in the statute, essentially.
Chair Hoover, staff would like to be heard on that issue. We asked the commission to look at 7510 C10, and I'm sure that Mr. Quinn is going to, I can imagine he's going to talk about it, because we think that 7510 C10 is pretty clear. Aye.
That allows SMECO to offer a green product, but I don't think it carves them out from having to comply with 7707 is the problem.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Brian Quinn on behalf of SMECO. SMECO filed comments on Wednesday, November 6th, which lay out our reasons. And I just want to back up and say a couple things. So staff agrees that SMECO should be exempt from the earlier provisions in these regs pursuant to the reference in 7510, the language we cited in our letter, and that's in the SB1 statute. So RISA doesn't seem to have any issue with it either. So we're talking about SB1, and again, going back, the reason we're all here, not to cast aspersions, and SB1 was enacted was because of electric suppliers and their issues related to the marketing of green products. SMECO has had a green product approved by this commission. Commissioner Richard was the only commissioner up here at the time. It was 2021, and my friend at RISA, we actually had to go to court, and RISA appealed that, and it came back. There was an appeal of it, and the commission's decision was upheld. So SMECO's already offering a green product. The ways in which SMECO is different from an electricity supplier are many. I'll just go through a couple. So SMECO has to come in every year and have an annual SOS review. SMECO has to come before this commission every year to change the rate in their SOS Green Rider today. So if there's marketing materials you want to see, that they haven't started marketing yet because the law only went into effect recently. But we just think this is a bit overreach, a bit duplicative, given the differences between a cooperative and an electric supplier. And I'll only say this too, again, carving out a cooperative here is consistent with the language in the statute, where the General Assembly recognized there's a difference between cooperatives and electric companies, for that matter. But absolutely, there's a difference between cooperatives and suppliers. So having said all that, happy to answer any questions.
So I do remember that the original draft of SB1 included language that would have permitted all the utilities to offer marketing in this area. And I actually had concerns about that. And the investor-owned utilities didn't really have any interest in doing that. And so there was a fairly early amendment to just eliminate that. But I do remember SMECO specifically, talking to the General Assembly saying, well, we actually do want to do this. We already do it. And so therefore we would like to continue to do it. And they did, specifically consider this carve-out provision because of SMECO's argument that, they needed that provision in order to keep doing what they're doing. So I guess my view is that the General Assembly intended to not have this apply to SMECO.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree also.
I guess if you got, and I realize you weren't in the room that time, but folks from your office were there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
I'm sure that's the case. I think I was just reading 7707 on its. Kind of seems like statutorily it applies, but we don't really necessarily feel particularly a way about it. I think it was just sort of our interpretation of the statute. Yeah.
And I remember apparently it was of importance enough to SMECO that they kind of went, over and above to make sure that if this original language got taken out, that they were still taken care of, and it seemed pretty important to them, and no one objected to it in the legislative process, and I don't think anybody here has got any substantive objection to it. So.
Yeah, that's fine. From Polly's perspective.
No,
that's
fine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just our reading of the statute.
Okay. So anything else?
No, I appreciate OPC.
No, I understand that. So what's the next step here for what we need to do?
I think we're largely on the same page, and we can sort of send you a revised version, hopefully quickly. The one issue I think we still have is for residential customers who are being offered a green product, can you use non-Maryland certified Regs? Again, I think staff is, I think SB1 is pretty clear that you can't. Obviously, other parties disagree. And I think that's a particularly fundamental issue, because if you can use non-PJM certified RECs, then when we go to set the generic cap, that will greatly affect it, because the cheapest REC you can buy that's Maryland certified is probably about $0.01 a kilowatt hour. Again, if you're buying an Oklahoma wind REC, that is 5/100ths of a penny per kilowatt hour. So that would have a substantial effect on what we, both this rule and the future case involving the cap.
I guess I'm trying to understand what the issue is. there are, in order to sell a green product, 51% has to be Maryland Recs, but that 49% could be could be fossil, it could be other kinds of green that don't meet the requirements. Out-of-state RECs, they could be RECs from California. I guess, Mr. Wallace, what your members would like to be able to sell 100% green product, but recognizing that maybe 49% of that would come from RECs from other states, and or not meet the Maryland REC requirements, and you'd like to be able to differentiate that product from a product where it meets the 51% requirement, and then the rest of it is just system power. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the idea is to have flexibility for different types of products, right? And we know that 51% has to be PJM RECs. And this is all, and no one's disagreeing. I totally agree with staff that, like, for that 51%, those need to be PJM RECs. They need to be retired in the PJM reserve sub-account, accessible to the commission. We agree with that. So all we're talking about is, what are the options on that 49%? And it sounds like what staff is saying is that has to also be PJM RECs, and that's not what it says in the statute. And
Yeah.
so that's our
So
concern.
I guess my question is, how do we confirm? How does staff confirm that the rest of the power, Oklahoma RECs, fine. There's lots of wind. Actually, there's a lot of wind in Texas. So let's say the Texas RECs. There's lots of RECs to be sold there. How do we confirm that those are legitimate?
So there's two ways. One is when the supplier comes in with their application up front, they're going to describe what their product is, right? And then on the back end, we were just talking about the compliance reporting section that's currently labeled consumer protection, but the A2 provision is the one that requires the supplier to document in a manner chosen by the commission the amount of renewable energy credits associated with electricity that's not RPS eligible. And so as we're thinking about that, we're seeing that, okay, for the 51%, that needs to be tracked in PJM, retired in the reserve sub-account, pursuant to A1 in that section. And for anything else, that would be reported to the commission and to staff under A2. And so that language is pretty broad. It's sort of up to the commission what they would want to see. I would think that, that may take the form of, an affidavit or some kind of, inventory of those RECs or something along those lines.
Mm-hmm.
But that there would be a process to satisfy staff and the commission on the back end that you've actually followed through with, satisfying whatever that requirement is based on the product that you described.
And then, and that is a problem for staff?
Well, and again, maybe I'm reading it incorrectly, but I believe, again, because, 7707A, where it states in this section, green power means energy resources, renewable, 100% hydro, environmentally friendly, those RECs, it later says, those RECs have to be retired into a GATS account, so by definition, they have to be PJM certified. And I guess the other distinction that I make, and again, I don't know why this was put in there, but my kind of impression is that explicit language about retired into a PJM sub-account was put in there because, the bill drafters understood when you retire something into that sub-account, that's it. A supplier, short of having, short of coming to staff and saying, hey, we made a mistake, can we replace them? They can never touch them again. They're retired permanently. On the other hand, if we get a Texas wind REC, well, they can provide us information about it, but I have, as far as I know, no way to verify that it's even a legitimate REC, or if it is a legitimate REC, that it can't be sold later to a third
Yeah, I
party.
mean, that's going to be, well, it's the 50, the fact that it's not 100%, they put 51%, that is the challenge. So there's going to be 49% that is going to be other kinds of products. But I think it's going to be a challenge for your members to be able to provide us with sufficient assurances that those RECs are going to be retired.
And that there's a number of different, REC reporting and tracking platforms that are available, and they all have mechanics to
Right,
retire RECs
right.
so they don't get double counted. And the commission could require the supplier to include an attestation or a verification from
Right.
somebody.
I mean, it's
So there's,
right, and I think that is the reality. I mean, it's going to be that case everywhere. They're to the extent that you allow other recs from other jurisdictions, there has to be some kind of way of assuring that those are not going to be double or triple counted, because we don't want that. So, but is that your concern? Is the being able to verify that those are, we know that they don't count for purposes of the 51%, but the question is, how can we get assurances that those are verifiable?
Correct. I mean, again, I know exactly how GATS works. I can verify every single year. I verify every single rec that's supposed to be retired is retired. There may be a way to do this that's just as reliable as GATS for Texas wind recs. I just don't know. But again, if the commission, again, my take is SB1 does not allow you to use. If your marketing is green, you cannot use, you can't say we're 75 or we're 100% green and get, say, 75% of your recs from PJM, 25 from, say, Texas, and say you're 100% green. You could say you're 75% green. But again, that's an interpretation I think is up to the commission.
So, and that is based on A?
Yes, A and, later C where it says, again,
E2.
Why? Yeah, it's,
Pardon me.
oh, no problem. Yeah, A and then, C where it says, 7707C, an electric supplier that supplies electricity to a residential retail electric customer may not market the green power unless, the percentage is above that. And then again, you go back to E2.
So, but it's the 51%.
Right. So, looking at this in whole, I don't believe you can use non-PJM recs, but again, if the commission determines, you can,
Well, it's actually not so much the recs, it's what you're representing. You can, as long as you meet that 51%, it seems to me from the statute, you can, for that 49%, you can represent that they're anything. I mean, it could be, nuclear, could be, and your members will, as long as they're clear that 51% of that comes from Maryland recs, and the rest, 49%, comes from wind in Texas or
It could
California,
It could just be brown power from PJM, and I think that's
or it could be
that's the language that OPC and RISA had similar kind of concepts that would sort of lay that out for customers of what are these respective percentages, so that so that it's clear in that initial disclosure what the breakdown is.
Excuse me. Thank you. Commissioner Suchman, I just want to make sure that I brought to your attention and to your attorney's attention 7707E2. It specifically says that a renewable energy credit an electricity supplier purchases shall be retired into a PJM GATS account, sub-account accessible by the commission.
Where are you
take your
again?
time. I can bring it up. I can bring it.
No, I'm looking at it now. So
Okay.
it's 7707.
Yeah, 7707E2, and it came through the bill, through Senate Bill 1, and it's now codified 7-707E as in Edward, 2. And what Mr. Mosier has been pointing out to me for a couple of weeks is that tells him exactly what he has to do. And from a point of statutory interpretation, and it was in the bill, so we know we've been told it was part of the consumer protection. And under standard rules of statutory interpretation, that clause, sub-account accessible by the commission, it would have no purpose there. In our interpretation, it's designed to do exactly what Mr. Mosier said, and that's why he has to do it that way. There would be no reason for that clause to be there.
Okay, so
Thank
what you're saying is that they can sell 75% renewable, and then they could say that other 25%, it represents purchases of RECs from Texas, but they can't claim that they are renewable.
I believe that's the case. Yeah, they can't say, again, renewable, green, anything like that. But again, if they were explicit that, we're 75% green and those were all Maryland recs to hit that 75%, and then they said something along the lines of, and for 25%, it's going to be brown power, but we're going to buy an equivalent amount of California renewable energy credits. I don't think that's a violation, but if they were saying it's 100% green there, I think that would be.
Right. I think we're going to have to ask our intrepid lawyers in the general counsel's office.
So,
If I may, just to make sure the record's clear about the way that we're interpreting this statute, right? So under E2, it requires a renewable energy credit a supplier purchases under paragraph 1, and paragraph 1 is for your green power offerings, right? So for your green power offerings, you have to purchase and retire Regs, and we know that the statute says that green power can be is defined above to include power energy marketed as clean, green, eco-friendly, environmentally friendly, carbon-free, renewable, 100% renewable. So they include both renewable and 100% renewable, 100% wind, 100% solar, emissions-free, or similar claims, right? So that definition contemplates there will be, it may not be 100%. It may not be 100% green. It may not be 100% renewable. And then the statute says that it can be 51%, as long as it's 51%. So it contemplates different percentages. So our view is if you interpret the statute as a whole, it's looking for you to hit at least 51% to retire the RECs for that green power 51% in your PJM GATS account accessible to the commission. And then it leaves open the option to use whatever you want for the balance of the 49%, but you have to disclose to customers what you're selling them. And so that's what we're saying. And as the commission is looking at developing this market, taking an overly prescriptive approach that requires suppliers to either offer 49% brown power or nothing, and preventing national wind products that help to advance the goal of combating climate change. If customers want that and it's disclosed to them in the contract and they're deciding that they want to purchase that, I think that's inherent in this structure that the General Assembly set up when they define green power broadly, but to include varying percentages, and then they set a minimum at 51% rather than 100%.
Okay, so Mr. Wallace, just so I understand what you're suggesting. So if you look at E2, that references back to E1, and says that an electric supplier shall purchase renewable energy credits for each year that they offer to sell green power. But it doesn't say that you have to purchase renewable energy credits for all of the green power. It's just saying if you are selling green power, then you have to, and you're representing that it's green power, you have to purchase renewable energy credits for each year that you're offering that green power.
And that's going to be a minimum of 51%.
And that's going to be a minimum of 51%. Okay.
So, OPC, you haven't really
Um,
hit on this.
yeah,
didn't
I mean,
realize
I'm
it
kind of
necessarily-
reading the statute the same as Risa is in this regard. Guidance on what the commission thinks the statute reads would be great. Just reading the 51%, right? I think our interpretation is that if you were only at 51%, you're at 49%, Texas Rex or something. I don't think you should be able to say you're 100% green under the statute, but perhaps generically green might be allowed. That's sort
I
of
guess
how
it's
we
that,
read it.
it's the 51%, putting that in as opposed to just, I mean, if they didn't put in the 51% and they just said, if you're selling green power, you have to have the requisite number of PJM credits, that would make sense to me as requiring 100%. But the fact that they put the 51% in suggests to me that they want credits. They want but that it's credits only for the 51 or whatever. It could be 52 or 53, and then the rest of it. It doesn't say offers all green power. It's just if you're offering green power, then you need to purchase these credits for the 51% or more of whatever is being purchased that's Maryland specific.
Yeah, that was sort of how I had read it too.
Yeah, it's the 51% that makes me think that the legislature intended some flexibility in how, I mean, and as Mr. Wallace sort of pointed out, unlike, NOx and SOx, which are much more regional, I mean, CO2 is everywhere. And so, to the extent that California makes a good decision about putting in wind or solar, that's a benefit that we get anyway.
I guess I would ask the question this way. I mean, is it possible for retail suppliers to create a product that is 100% Maryland recognized Regs, the Regs we use for our RPS?
It is one of the possibilities.
Possibility, okay.
It's the most expensive possibility.
Okay, but it could be 75%, and is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, well, and in a sense, by saying to be green, you have to be at least you have to be 51% Maryland. The sense are saying Maryland Recs are kind of, what we use for our RPS is kind of like the gold standard. Mm-hmm. That's where we start. That's the minimum, and then from there, it can get better. So, wouldn't there be an advantage for the state, and wouldn't it be a better, more environmentally, sound product if it were in fact 100% Maryland Recs? Wouldn't that be the optimal product available on the market?
It depends what you're trying to achieve, right? If the General Assembly's goal was to...
We can achieve a lot of different things, but
Yeah.
again, as far as Maryland is concerned, the best product that you could purchase.
I don't know it would necessarily be the best because it would be the most expensive, right? If you're trying
I'm not talking about
balance-
cost. But if it were offered, there might be a customer out there that'd be interested in that product because they would be then truly compliant with what Maryland defines as an RPS. No black liquor, no incinerators, no all this other stuff that it could be. It would just be, I'm a Marylander, I want to buy a product that is truly 100%. Wouldn't that be the product that would be 100% Maryland Recs?
I guess, would a customer potentially be interested in that over something else? Perhaps,
Okay.
yeah.
I guess as far as a customer protection, shouldn't there be, again, a bright line of what it is they're getting? And isn't that kind of what staff are trying to suggest right now? That there be a product that's maybe the gold standard, and then something between the 51% and 100%.
Yeah, and what we put in our comments in the 9757 case was that we recommend that the commission, in setting the green power pricing, look at these different structures, and maybe a Maryland SREC product that from a supply cost is several fold more expensive than a tier 2 product, that might have a different price cap than, and to take into account, and I think the statute contemplates taking into account where are the RECs coming from, what are the resource types, and that there may be different value to both Maryland and to consumers based on what that product is comprised of.
Okay, so I think I agree. It could be all kinds of different products, but don't we want to make sure that we have a clear definition of, again, what a 100% product would look like? You could market it, say, hey, it's 51% Maryland, and then the rest is California. But I think at some point, shouldn't there be the ability to, again, clearly define what a 100% green product is by Maryland standards? And do we want to make that clear and not confuse customers by throwing out the term 100% for everything?
Well, and I think what we're proposing is that the disclosure language that we talked about today be provided up front to customers so they could see what the breakdown is from the start. So we're not suggesting that the commission do away with that or that we obfuscate the percentages. We just want to make sure that the underlying products, there's flexibility as long as that is adequately and clearly explained to customers so that they know what they're buying, and that if a product costs more but it has different or higher quality RECs that customer prefers, then that would seem to be appropriate. But what we don't want to do is require that the only option in Maryland is Maryland RPS eligible RECs, because that's the most expensive option, and there's been a challenge with a shortfall of Recs, and we want to make sure that, you know, there, whatever we establish in this proceeding allows an opportunity for there to be a market for these green power products. Even the one that's 51% and 49% brown, I mean, that's almost twice as green as SOS at 35%. I mean, it's significantly higher.
Yeah.
So those are really good products, right?
Yeah, I guess we're at 33% now, but anyway, I'm kind of interested in from a I guess for marketing purposes and for consumer protection, how can we, I guess I'd ask OPC and staff, you know, make the clear line what it is we're talking about, so we don't require a product that's 49% brown, but at the same time is clear that you know, we have a superior product versus a, you know.
And I think that's the difficulty, and I think we would just have to, you know, make sure if the commission does allow a supplier to use California wind Recs, I think we would just have to make sure that if we saw that marketing material, you know, it didn't say, oh, you're getting a 100% green product, you're getting a 50% green product and then a 50% California wind product. Because I didn't write the bill obviously, but my assumption is they use some of this very specific language about retired into a GATS account because, you know, currently there's no way to verify, or at least we've never found a way to verify that, you know, any of these non-PJM recs are retired. And again, I think my again, kind of guessing what the legislature thought was that, you know, customers, you know, we already have the issue that if you're marketing something as green, so many customers think, oh, well, I'm getting my electricity directly from, you know, a wind farm. Well, I think beyond that, a lot of them think, well, even if they halfway understand RECs, they're like, okay, well, at least they're Maryland certified RECs that I'm purchasing. You know, if a customer is being sold a California REC, I just think at bare minimum we need to make sure, however we do that, that the customer is not confused and, you know, and clearly realizes we're buying, you know, we're paying extra for RECs that are coming from across the country.
Yeah, I agree with everything staff just said, and like the interpretation of the interpretation of statute, I agree with Commissioner Suchman. I think I'm not sure I can get around that, the idea that, yeah, you can offer something that is 51% Maryland recs, 49% California or Texas or whatever. But I do agree with everything you said, Commissioner Richard, that, you know, we should be very careful not to call everything 100% green or 100% this or that unless it meets, you know, it's entirely composed of, you know, GATS, Maryland recs. And so, you know, I sort of echo everything staff said and being careful that you know, how we go about doing that, I guess, is difficult. You know, might be a bit of a, you know, laying out groundwork might be difficult. It might be a case-by-case thing. I'm not 100% sure how to do that at this moment. Maybe something to take under advisement. But
and I guess
yeah.
that's my final question. I mean, is staff language closer in the direction of trying to make that distinction, I guess?
Yes, you know, again, if my interpretation of SB1 is correct, then all of these recs would have to be Maryland certified recs, which again, yeah, would make it really clear why. But if not, you know, and I think, you know, if it's decided there is a way to use, you know, Texas wind recs for residential customers, you know, maybe then if a supplier plans on doing that, they make that part of their application, and in their application they provide us some, you know, how exactly they're going to market it, you know, how we can make sure that the marketing they're going to be sending out to customers isn't misleading. You know, they'd have to provide us something showing, okay, you know, here's how we're actually going to verify that we purchase and retire and that these California recs can't be double counted in some way. So yeah, maybe that's it. You know, maybe our default position is, unless you can, you know, prove beyond a reasonable amount that, you know, these 3 steps are being taken, we're not going to approve your green application.
And
Or
does
for
that need to
green-
be in the regulations, or is that going to just be in practice?
I think you could put that in regulations, but I think we could just have it in practice, and, you know, and again, and if the commission decided something else.
Mr. Chu, is that something that OPC would rather have in regulation? Just the clarity of.
I mean, it would be nice, but we don't have the language right now, so.
Commissioner, but in if we scroll down right here, under A2, it requires that the supplier, make that showing on the back end, right? That you have to document in a manner chosen by the commission.
Well, that's for like the yearly
You're
reports
right.
at the end. Like, I don't think that's good enough.
Well, Mr. Chair, I guess I would lean in favor at this point of staff language, unless we could come up with some language, at least to better define what a 100% green product. We know what a green product is, but I think then there are products in between green and 100% green, and I think there's only 100% green, and that would be a product that's all, 100% Maryland Regs.
And when a supplier comes in with their application, they're going to describe their offering. They're going to explain the percentages, and I think that the commission can look at that, and if there's something that that the commission wants to add to the application form to explain about how the RECs will be retired for the various portions of the product, and how that'll be demonstrated. I mean, it seems like that could be something that could be included in the application form, and that staff and OPC can ask about up front.
So, if you go up to, you eliminated, in the offer, or the application submission, fuel type, year generated, and proof of current market prices of similar RECs. So that, is it possible to put back in some language in here about, for the product, it needs to, you need to identify what is Maryland rec specific, and what other types, what other fuel sources you're going to be including, so that if it's wind, you have to identify what state it comes from, and rec retirement procedures.
Yeah, the statutory reference here, D3, has a whole, it requires you to address the amount of electricity that's eligible for inclusion in the RPS, the state in which the electricity was generated, applicable market data. So it's very broad in terms of, the information that a supplier.
No, but you've eliminated that. All that was struck.
Well, we cross-referenced 707 D3 in the statute rather than a separate list in the regulation.
Okay, but okay, so let me just look at.
And that this application is specifically to exceed the baseline, so that's slightly different. The initial application to even be a green power supplier is above that in B, 2053-0715B.
But it includes similar things. The amount of electricity eligible for inclusion in the RPS, the state in which the electricity was generated.
No, but I'm asking for something, in addition to that, it's to include the process for retiring non-Maryland RECs.
Yeah,
Because that gets to the concern I think that staff has, which is a legitimate concern. I mean, if you're going to be promoting a product that is, could be 100% wind, where, 51% of the wind comes from Maryland, 49% comes from other places. If you're doing that, you have to include in the application an explanation of how those RECs are going to be retired. Even though they don't count for Maryland purposes, they do count when you're representing a product. And if that product is 100% wind.
Yeah, I think we could work on something with staff and OPC to
Okay.
address that point. I mean, we
And Mr.
certainly-
Mosier, does that start to get to some of your concerns?
I think so, and that may be something that we wouldn't even necessarily need to put in the regulations. I could just add that to the application.
Yeah, actually, I think it may be. If we've been talking about this for the last 20 minutes, I think it's actually something that is probably of enough concern that, because it's a big issue, and could involve a lot of staff time trying to to track down what the requirements are in other jurisdictions for rec retirement.
Right, and I think, if whatever the supplier provided us, if we thought it didn't meet that requirement, we'd be recommending rejection. And of course, if we did, it'd still have to go in front of the commission, and if you weren't satisfied,
Right.
well, they're not offering that product.
Yeah, no, I think that would give us comfort as well. If you're going to be representing a renewable product, it may not be a Maryland renewable product, but we need to know that it actually is a legitimate product. Because I'm assuming you're going to be charging a premium for it, and so that's going to be.
Well, actually, since we've gotten into the promotion of renewables, and I'm talking about even prior to the RPS, there's always been this, discussion over the fact that, we wanted homegrown renewables, and that's why we went to offshore wind, because it was a way to get homegrown renewables, because you couldn't do as much land-based wind here because of the geography, and there was even limits on solar. So I think what the General Assembly understands the fact that that it's very difficult to get 100%, Maryland based renewable product, and so this is an admission that if you're going to have green power, it's probably going to be some mix of windmills and other places in the country. But I think what they were looking for was to make sure that, again, along the lines of the consumer protection stuff, that people weren't getting scammed. So it was fine if it was green power someplace else, but it had to be green power. And so I think, if we can come up with some way of, creating a definition or a process that gives us the comfort level that when his clients are out there selling green power, that people are in fact buying green power. Now, I think there's a small segment of the customers who probably want to be, very, very precise about where their green power comes from, and they may even be willing to pay, extra for it. And I guess you'll find out, if you offer, some product like that, even if it is significantly higher than anything else, you may find some folks that are willing to do it. But I think the bottom line from the General Assembly was we wanted to make sure that if folks bought green power, they were assured by us that they were in fact buying green power.
Right, and it may be that, for instance, say one of the suppliers is using Iowa Rex, it may be that they have to somehow work with MISO to do so that we can do in MISO what we do in PJM. If MISO, I think, has something like GATS, so they could work to make sure we had an account where we could go there and verify that, or again, something in ERCOT like that.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so that was the last outstanding issue, correct?
I believe so.
So I guess the question I have for staff counsel is, are we in a position where we can formally adopt anything, or do we need to do all of you need to go back and kind of rework all this stuff, and then we come back and do this at a later date?
I'd feel better with the second,
Okay.
and if that's okay, and we would clean it up,
Yeah, I
share it
understand
with
that.
everybody.
So I guess I'd rather, I'd like to get this done sooner rather than later, but, if there's stuff that needs to be tweaked and fixed and things like that, then I think we can come back and do this again. So we've done that with cyber and some of the other regs that we've been doing. So does that work for?
Yeah, I think for the supplier coalition, time is of the essence. I think we've talked about.
I understand that part, and so I guess the message to staff is, time is of the essence, and the sooner we can get it done, the latter. But hopefully, the next time we meet, we'll literally just go through the formalities of, proposal and adoption by us, and then on to the process through the Maryland Register. So I think and again, we've done this with a couple other rulemakings where things were not all agreed to by everybody, and so we took a couple of bites at it, and then finally got to an end product that went through without any problems. So
Does the commission have a particular timeline for when they?
I guess again, I'll turn to how soon can you turn this around, and as soon as you can get it turned around, we can try and find time to. Now, it won't happen next week, but the week after is a possibility, I guess, if you can get it done.
I think we'll get it turned around by
but I think we can get it, yeah, turn it, yeah,
Wednesday, Tuesday, Wednesday?
Tuesday or Wednesday, I think so.
Next week, get it.
Yeah, you know,
Like I said, a couple of us won't be here next week.
But we could.
well, I think unless OPC or RISA thinks this is an issue, I think we can kind of circulate some drafts, maybe talk, and get you something by, at the latest, next Friday.
Okay, that'd be work, yeah. And we can probably schedule at that point, so, okay.
Yep.
All right, well, I guess we're done for today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Actually,
Alexis, we're yeah, you have us.
this email that
You have,
sent
yeah,
me.
you have us
Tell me what
next
you
for
wanna
the other parts of SB one. You have,
I can't even see it.
Oh, this is
yeah,
the
we're
column.
supposed to be.
Oh, it's the
Oh, I guess,
Yeah.
oh, okay, so do we, yeah, so we, what,
I could do it now. I brought lunch with me.
thank you.